I tracked my food, trained 5-6 days a week, ate healthy meals, did everything right, but the lower belly fat wouldn't off. And for years, I had no idea why. But eventually, I cracked it and reached a sustainable 11 to 13% body fat. So if you've lost weight but you still can't see your abs, you'll see what's been holding you back and how I finally got six-pack lean without starving, bulking and cutting, or obsessing over cardio. At first, it made no sense because I was tracking my food using MyFitnessPal, I was lifting consistently, logging every workout in a notebook, riding my bike to the gym, and I gained a bit of muscle, but my abs were still buried by fat. And this whole time I thought maybe it's just my body type or it's just my genetics. But when I saw other guys making progress that I wanted to see and I could see where they started, I knew something was off with what I was doing. And this is what really pushed me to dig deeper into what was actually stopping me from getting lean. But I didn't really understand nutrition or body composition back then. And obviously my body fat was still too high to ever expect to see visible abs. I was around 18 to 20% body fat, which can still look slim in clothes, but it's not lean enough for visible ab definition. Now, for most guys, the abs will start to show at around 15% body fat, but they really pop somewhere between that 11 to 13%. No matter how clean I ate, until I reached that level, the abs were just never going to show. And I still had another big lesson to learn. I thought I just needed to train harder, more 2-hour-long workout sessions, more ab exercises, and more cardio. But the breakthrough only actually came when I stopped trying to out-train my diet. Because no amount of crunches or extra sets or cardio can undo a calorie surplus. And being stuck in that maintenance zone, just hoping and praying to finally lose weight, it's delusional. And see, if you train your abs, it's going to make them thicker. But if you're over 15% body fat, it's not necessarily going to make them leaner and easier to see. So I finally stopped wasting time doing lots of ab exercises and wasting time on the cross trainer or the spin bike, and instead shifted my focus to my diet and my daily calorie burn in order to stay in a deficit more consistently. And that is when I was really forced to finally figure out nutrition. And here's how I did that. I see a lot of people saying, just eat less and move more. And yeah, that is technically true. But if it were that simple and easy, everybody would be ripped right now. And I found that by forcing myself to eat less and move more didn't really work in the way that I thought it would, because I would just get hungrier. I'd feel irritable all day. I'd be thinking about food even an hour after I've eaten a meal. And sometimes I would even get dizzy or lightheaded during my workouts, especially when I was trying to hit new heavier weights or PBs that I'd never reached before. And that's when I realized it wasn't just how much I was eating, but what I was actually eating, what was on the plate that mattered just as much to me. For example, healthy foods like olive oil, butter, nuts, protein bars, juices, and sauces was racking up calories without making me feel full or satisfied. And so once I started weighing and tracking the food accurately, and I swapped in lower calorie but higher volume foods. For example, instead of having steak and salmon, I switched more to chicken, lean beef, and more egg whites instead of egg yolks. Instead of breads, pastas, and oats, I replaced those with more potato, pumpkin, and vegetables. I also cut back on the fat content, and I used those calories to spend more on carbs and protein, the stuff that would actually bulk out the meal and fill me up. What also helped was steaming my vegetables instead of baking them, because baking them would dry them out, steaming them would retain the water content, and I didn't have to use oil to steam it, so I would save hundreds of calories every day, potentially thousands of calories a week by cutting out these unnecessary oils. Now, I know oils are healthy, but we don't need hundreds or 150 to 200 grams of oil every day or fats. It's not necessary to be healthy. And in general, I would minimize meals that were heavy and rich in fat. Stuff like Indian curries or Thai curries, stir fries that have a lot of oil in it that is unnecessary, although quite tasty. I'll try to minimize that as much as possible. And I just stopped blindly eating whatever I was served up without knowing what went into that meal, what is actually on my plate. It sounds difficult, but it's pretty easy to do once you've done it for 1 week. Another thing, I also swapped out a lot of the snacky packagey type food or drinks for fruit, tea, black coffee, or even soda water, which I found helps suppress the appetite a little bit in between meals. But I wouldn't have black coffee after lunch. And yeah, I admit I still ate out once or twice a week at least, but I made sure that it fit my budget, so it didn't really impact whether I was going to be in that deficit or not. And I know this is all very simple, and there's probably going to be 20 geniuses in the comments section saying,
"Oh, this is so basic. Everybody knows this."
Well, congratulations, you know it, but that doesn't mean 8 billion people on the planet know what you know. So just calm down a little bit and accept that the basics is actually what takes care of like 90 to 95% of the results that people want to see. If the complicated stuff worked, every video I make would be super complicated. But that stuff doesn't work. It just confuses everybody. And so doing everything I just explained saved me from falling into an even bigger trap that keeps guys stuck above this 15 to 20% body fat for decades. So I tried bulking once, which just really meant getting deliberately fatter, and then forcing myself to have to lose that fat that I've just gained, and that sucked. I decided I'm never doing that again. So instead, I just stayed between that 11 to 13% body fat range, which I mention all the time, and focused on slow and steady gains. I still built and maintained the muscle that I had, even though I wasn't gaining fat. And honestly, I found this a lot more motivating because I could actually see the muscle shape changing because it wasn't hidden by the fat from trying to bulk. And often guys who do a massive bulk end up losing the majority of the muscle they gained during the bulk anyway because they had to cut so hard to get back to the lean point that they were at. And this is why I recommend not just losing body fat, but also trying to build as much muscle as you practically can. I mean, you can't spend 5 or 6 days in the gym for 2 hours a session. That's ridiculous. But you can still completely change your physique in just 3 workouts a week, even from home if your workouts are fully optimized. But I also have to add another thing that made losing fat just so much harder and so much slower, for me at least, and might be affecting you too. Even when my training and diet were good, poor sleep and high stress just made it so much tougher. I didn't get how important sleep actually was. I would be up late scrolling, watching TV, having stressful conversations, feeling anxious about work and life and money and goals, and trying to get a Lamborghini in my garage like Ty Lopez. All that stuff just stressed my whole body out and ruined my sleep. And what made it worse is I would then go train my body that was still sore from the last session. And this was dumb because I wasn't fully recovered. So it's like any gains I could have made, I just neutralized because I didn't let the muscles fully recover from that session anyway. As a result, I got sick more often, which meant I had to miss workouts. And typically being sick often meant I would gain a bit of fat, and taking a week or 2 off working out means that I would hit plateaus. And it would take me like 3 to 4 weeks just to get back up to where I was before I got sick. And there were periods where I thought nothing is working, life's too hard. But really, honestly, my body just needed more rest and less stress, less anxiety, less ambitions to try and be some superhuman. And so once I did prioritize my sleep, I took more rest days in between workouts, did, some more chiropractic work, just managing and taking care of this vehicle that is my body. That's when losing body fat became a lot smoother, not necessarily much faster, but it felt easier, and I didn't feel like I was struggling week after week after week. And I know it is not easy to fix this. Just about everyone in a first world country is stressed out to the max because our culture is built on ambition and stress and striving to try and be somebody that we're not. However, it will make a huge difference by recovering deeply every single night or as often as possible and not being constantly under the pump. I remember when I was training with a buddy who was a fair bit ahead of me in terms of strength and muscle development. And there was this one day where I was like, man, I've really got to train. Like it's whatever it was, back day or chest day. And I was really like super obsessed and motivated at this point in time. So I never wanted to miss a session. And I said to him like, man, what should I do? Like, should I go train? But like, I'm pretty tired and I haven't ate lunch. And he just said, dude, go rest. Why are you even thinking about training? And I felt really stupid for asking, but I'm glad he said that because it made me realize like, yeah, like why am I pushing so hard to get somewhere so soon when I can literally train for the rest of my life? It's not a race. And in seeing this, it taught me another valuable lesson that I see most guys ignore. So you've probably caught on that I used to expect really fast results. All those hypey articles and fitness magazines corrupted my mind. Like 30 days to huge biceps, ab swings, magical protein powders. I was a sucker for all these gimmicks. And what I didn't want to accept is that it takes way longer than what I wanted to believe it would actually take. And I didn't know any better, but it was still frustrating to think it actually was going to happen in 30 days or 6 weeks to rip 6-pack abs or whatever the hell it was. And like 6 months of consistent training felt like just an eternity. It felt like it was impossible. I'm never going to do that. But once I actually did it, it worked. And I learned that if I'm constantly switching my workouts around, trying to play hopscotch with different trends and different strategies and training styles and different eating structures, it really just got me nowhere. It just got me more confused because everyone had a different opinion. So at some point I just said, fuck it, stick to my guns. I got stubborn and I focused on getting really good at the simple stuff, which I'd never done. And this next point I'm about to explain made this whole process much simpler and easier. So I got my diet and training systemized, but my daily burn rate wasn't consistent, because if that dropped, I would then slip out of a deficit and I'd be in maintenance or fat gain mode again. And so I just started walking more each day. Nothing crazy, just casual walking for any reason or walking for no reason. And I found that the 10,000 steps, I know it's super cliche, but 10,000 steps was actually a really good foundation, because below that, it did shrink the deficit a bit more and it put more pressure on my diet. But if I could hit 10K or more, my calorie burn for the day would be consistent and for the average for the entire week. And I'd just rather not cut out food calories if I don't have to, because I ideally want to eat as much food as possible while still losing body fat. I don't want to be eating the least amount of food, suffering, trying to force body fat to be incredibly unsustainably quick. That's like the worst possible way to go about it. But it wasn't just that. I also cleaned up my entire environment as best that I could. And this meant no crappy food laying around in the house, no beers in the fridge, spending less time with people who eat like crap and don't care about their health, and spending more time with people who were into health and who trained, because that really helped shift my mindset more than I expected. But there was another hurdle every time I had to travel, even if it was for a couple of days. So what I did is I would treat travel kind of like a mini diet break. So I would eat at maintenance levels. I would still keep my walking up to those similar targets. I would still train where I could, even if it was 1 or 2 workouts less while being away. If I could still get 1 or 2 workouts in, that was great. And by doing this, it just made getting back into that deficit so much smoother and easier once the travel was finished. And life's just way easier when we're in our home routine and with less damage to fix. However, if I didn't implement this one thing that I need to show you, I never would have got 6-pack lean, and you'll see why. So what finally worked for me wasn't fun, it wasn't exciting, it was really just boring consistency. I just repeated what worked for long enough to actually get the results. And I know most people don't want to hear that. They want the shortcut. They want to see it yesterday. They want the 8-week program, not the 16 or the 24. But it's precisely that impatience that is screwing you up. Because on a scale of patience to pain, the less patient you are, the more pain you're going to experience. The more patient you are, the less pain you're going to experience. And one thing that was really painful is when the scale wouldn't move, even if I was being perfect. However, the mirror would always reflect back the truth. And more importantly, tracking photos at least every 3 to 4 weeks. Because sometimes my body shape changed and I didn't even notice it until I took new photos and put them side by side and went, oh wow, okay, my hips are leaner, my pecs look more defined, there's more veins on my arm, but I couldn't see it every day or each morning looking in the mirror. However, I also went a little bit too far, all the way down to 6% body fat. And this taught me firsthand what too lean actually looks and feels like. However, it was a good experience to do just once, because then I reverse dieted out of that up to that 11 to 13% body fat range. And that was probably the best part, the most fun part, because it was fun to be able to eat more food, get bigger pumps in the gym, lift heavier weights more smoothly, and just see my body still looking lean, but in a way that it's never looked so pumped and jacked than ever before. And my diet was a lot more flexible in that reverse diet phase. And I've maintained that 11 to 13% range for the past 9 years pretty easily without having to do anything extreme. It's really like the sweet spot for being like ripped enough but not too lean, and still having enough flexibility to enjoy the food you eat without having to do hours of cardio every single day. I didn't say it's easy to get to that 11 to 13% range. However, maintaining it is simpler than what most people think. Most people think it's going to be extremely hard, but they're thinking about like 8% body fat, which is stupid. I wouldn't recommend anyone get to 8% body fat, because you're going to suffer. You're not going to have much energy. Your sex drive and libido is going to fall through the floor. And you're going to feel like a zombie every day. However, 13 to 11%, I feel good all the time. And the key to all of this that I want to share with you is that it all came down to tracking my biofeedback data, which became like my GPS. It kept me honest about my training, about everything I was eating, my sleep, my daily steps, my weekly averages, my monthly trends, even my seasonal trends, so I could see, do I drop the ball in winter? Is it summer or spring when I start to care more what's actually going on in my behavior? And I just couldn't hide from the truth. And the good news is that once you're lean and your food is systemized, you don't have to track forever. You can learn to eyeball your portions and keep a mental note of what you're eating, and use the mirror as your instant feedback, looking at your ab definition to tell you, okay, am I gaining fat? Am I losing fat, or am I maintaining week to week? So it's much simpler once you get to that lean point. And then the scale just becomes secondary, because if you're lean and you're staying lean, you don't really need to get on the scale unless you're just curious to know what you actually weigh. And this is why the data is the solid foundation under my business body blueprint routine. You just follow the steps, plug in your metrics, and you'll see exactly what is working or what's not working and what's in the way that needs to be changed or optimized so that you can keep making progress. And then with all this data, it's very easy to fine tune your diet. You don't have to cut out entire food groups. You might just say, okay, well, I'm going to shave this, cut back on that, swap this meal around. On Friday, I want to eat out, so I'm going to do this on Thursday or this on Saturday. It gives you back the control so you're deciding what's happening inside your body, the food you're eating, how much you're moving, and what your body fat level's doing. You can also keep an eye on your recovery and see the trends, which is going to help you become a fat burning machine if that is your goal. No matter how busy or hectic life can get, there is a formula that once you crack that code, you will consistently lose body fat. To learn more about it, just tap the link right below this video. And if you're serious about getting lean for life, watch this video next, where I'll break down the real reason that most guys struggle to lose belly fat after 30.